My rich wife and her mother left for a trip to Mexico, telling me I would stay home to take care of my wife's sister's bedridden daughter, who had a speech impediment. However, as soon as they left, she stood up and said, "Help me, they're all bad. They need my 17 million, please help." So, we devised a plan, and when they returned home, my name's Miles Garner, and if there's one thing I've learned in the 6 years since marrying Sabrina, it's that money doesn't buy happiness. It buys therapy bills, fake smiles, and in-laws who think humility is a communicable disease. Sabrina and her mother, Margot, were the kind of rich who treated kindness like an allergic reaction, and poor people like an endangered species that they occasionally donated to for PR points. They had that luxury glow about them, you know, the kind you get from exfoliating your soul with the tears of middle-class waiters. Me, I was the practical one, the guy who knew how to change a tire, fix a leaky faucet, and make a decent omelet without Googling it. I married into their world, thinking I'd bring a little balance. Turns out, I was just the handyman who came with emotional labor and a 401k. So when Sabrina waltzed into the living room one Friday morning wearing sunglasses the size of her ego and said, "Mom and I are going to Mexico for 2 weeks," I thought maybe, just maybe, the universe was giving me a break. Finally, I'd have peace. No, Miles, why is the champagne room light too dim? Or, Miles, why does the pool water smell like chemicals? As if chlorine was a personal attack. I was already mentally planning my 2 weeks of beer, bad TV, and blissful silence. But before I could pop open the celebratory Bud Light, she added, "You'll stay here and take care of my niece, Lila." I blinked at her like she'd just asked me to babysit a ghost. "The bedridden one?" I asked, praying she meant some other Lila. "Nope." Margot chimed in from her perch on the sofa, wearing pearls in disapproval. "Yes, dear. Poor thing can't walk or talk. Just feed her soup and keep her clean. Try not to mess that up." The way she said it, you'd think I'd been caught burning down orphanages for fun. I should have said no. Every fiber of my sanity screamed it. But saying no to Margot was like saying no to the IRS. Technically possible, but guaranteed to ruin your life. I opened my mouth to argue, but Sabrina had already started tapping on her phone, probably booking matching pedicure appointments for their mother-daughter bonding session. "You'll be fine, me, puppy," Anna said with that breezy tone rich people use when they're volunteering you for unpaid labor. "Lila just needs attention. You're good with chores. Chores, not care, not family. Chores, I swear. If my dignity were a stock, it would have gone public and crashed within seconds." By the time they rolled their designer luggage out to the driveway, I'd already given up hope. Margot gave me her usual "try not to embarrass us" smirk, while Sabrina kissed me on the cheek like I was the gardener she tipped out of obligation. "Don't forget to water the succulents," she added, because God forbid her plants die while I was keeping her niece alive. I waved as their luxury SUV pulled away, thinking, great, babysitting a mute statue while they sip margaritas and pretend to discover their souls. I trudged back inside, the house suddenly too big and too quiet. The scent of Sabrina's perfume lingered in the air like a bad decision. I dropped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had turned into a rom-com directed by Satan. My phone buzzed. Sabrina's text. "Be gentle with Lila. She's delicate." I stared at it for a full minute, debating whether to respond with, "You mean like your sense of self-awareness?" But decided silence was the safer option. Instead, I muttered to myself, "Delicate, right? So delicate, she probably has a trust fund bigger than my lifetime earnings." I made myself a cup of coffee, the only companion I trusted, and braced for the awkward encounter ahead. I'd met Lila twice before, both times during family gatherings where she was rolled in like a fragile museum exhibit. Everyone acted sympathetic, but not one of them actually cared. Margot used her as a sympathy prop to boost her philanthropic image. Sabrina posted selfies beside her with captions like, "Family means everything, because nothing says love like a curated hashtag." I'd always felt weird about it. The girl barely made a sound, and the whole family treated her like background furniture. Now suddenly I was in charge of her? The same me who once killed a cactus from overwatering it? Fantastic. As I walked down the hallway to the guest room, I rehearsed what to say. "Hey, Lila, how's it going?" "No, too casual." "Hi there, sweetheart. Uncle Miles here." "Nope," sounded like I was auditioning for a creepy PBS show. I knocked softly and pushed open the door. The room was spotless, too spotless, hospital clean. Pale pink curtains, soft lighting, and that faint antiseptic smell that screamed money and guilt. Lila lay on the bed, motionless, eyes half open. She looked about 19, maybe 20, with long brown hair spread across the pillow like she was in a shampoo commercial gone wrong. A wheeled chair sat by the window, untouched. "Hey, Lila," I said quietly, stepping inside with the grace of a man trying not to offend the air. "It's just me and you now." My voice sounded like it belonged to a babysitter who'd already lost faith in humanity. No response, of course. I sighed and looked around, noticing a collection of stuffed animals neatly arranged on the dresser, like they were waiting for their annual tax audit. I set the tray of soup and mashed potatoes on her nightstand. "So, your aunt, told me to feed you and keep you clean. Guess we're roommates for a while." Nothing. Just the soft hum of air conditioner. I rubbed at the back of my neck, feeling like the world's worst caretaker. "Okay, I'll help you sit up for the soup." I reached out cautiously because I didn't want to accidentally break the family's delicate heirloom, and that's when the unthinkable happened. She moved, not like a twitch or a reflex. She sat up, straight, strong. Then she swung her legs over the side of the bed and said, perfectly clearly, help me." I froze mid-motion, my brain short-circuited like a bad Wi-Fi signal. Aren't you supposed to be," she smirked, one eyebrow raised. "Bedridden? Yeah, that's what they want everyone to think." I swear, my jaw hit the floor so hard it bounced. "Wait, so you can walk? And talk? And holy hell, you have sarcasm?" "Yep," she said, stretching her legs like she'd been waiting for this moment forever. "But don't freak out. I need your help." My survival instincts kicked in. "Hold up. I'm gonna need at least one logical reason why my wife's niece, who's been mute and paralyzed for 3 years, is currently auditioning for Cirque du Soleil in my guest room." She looked me dead in the eye. "Because they're all bad, Uncle Miles, all of them. They want my money." I blinked. "Your money?" $14 million, she said calmly, like she was discussing lunch options. "From my dad's estate." I stared at her. 14 million with an M? Like not Monopoly money? She nodded, dead serious. "They're waiting for me to die so they can take it." And just like that, my weekend of quiet soup duty turned into a full-blown Netflix thriller. I sat down on the edge of her bed, trying to process. "Okay, just so I'm clear, you've been pretending to be an invalid for 3 years because your mom and my lovely wife are trying to rob you blind?" "Bingo," she said, popping her neck like a pro wrestler. "They forged medical papers, hired a fake doctor, and isolated me so they could control my trust fund. I've been playing along while gathering evidence." I rubbed my temples. Jesus. And here I thought my biggest problem was remembering to water the succulents. She cracked a small smile. "You're actually taking this better than I expected." "Oh, don't get me wrong," I said, standing up. "I'm internally screaming. But compared to dinner with your grandmother, this is almost relaxing." She laughed, a sound that didn't belong in this house full of secrets. "So, will you help me?" she asked. And in that moment, I had two choices. Pretend I hadn't heard her and go back to my peaceful, pathetic routine, or finally do something worthwhile with my existence. I looked at her, this brave, brilliant kid trapped in a mansion of monsters, and said, "Leela, I've made a lot of bad choices, but agreeing to help you won't be one of them." Her face lit up like someone who'd just found an ally in hell. And honestly, maybe she had. I had no clue what I was getting into. All I knew was that the universe had just handed me the weirdest, wildest redemption arc imaginable. So, yeah, forget the peace and quiet. The assignment from hell had officially begun, and I had a front row seat to the downfall of the world's most dysfunctional family. I swear, if someone had told me that my Saturday would start with soup duty and end with a walking miracle, I would have asked what brand of whiskey they were drinking. So there I was, standing in the doorway of Lila's room, holding a tray of mashed potatoes and chicken soup like some underpaid hospice intern, rehearsing small talk in my head because silence made me feel like a criminal. "Hey, Lila, it's just me and you now," I said, doing my best impression of a guy who didn't want to scare the supposedly mute girl. The air in that room was heavy, the kind of quiet that makes you wonder if ghosts have better social lives than you. I moved closer, careful not to bump the nightstand stacked with medical supplies I couldn't pronounce. And then it happened, the part where my sanity filed for divorce. Before I could even set the tray down, Lila, sweet, motionless, supposedly helpless Lila, sat up like she'd just heard the theme music of Law and Order, Payback Unit. She swung her legs over the bed, hair tumbling over her shoulders, and looked right at me. "Help me," she said in a voice so clear and confident it could have belonged to a news anchor. My first thought? That soup was laced. My second thought? I should have charged Margot an hourly rate for this nonsense. I croaked, blinking so hard my eyes started buffering. "Aren't you supposed to be, not doing that?" She smirked like a magician caught mid-trick. "You mean bedridden?" "Yeah, that's what they want everyone to think." I nearly dropped the tray. "Wait, they? Who's they? Did I just walk into a cult subplot?" She hopped off the bed, stretching her legs like she was warming up for a yoga class. "Margot, Sabrina, my mom, they all want me gone." Gone as in sent away gone? Or Netflix true crime documentary gone? I asked, backing toward the door in case I needed to sprint out and Google how to perform an exorcism. She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Don't be ridiculous. They want my money." I blinked. "Your money?" $14 million, she said, like it was no big deal, like we were discussing the weather. "From my dad's estate." I felt the blood drain from my face. 14 million? With an M? Not like pesos or crypto or Monopoly bucks. US dollars, she said flatly. "And they're waiting for me to die so they can take it." I looked around for the hidden cameras because this had to be one of those prank shows where they record middle-aged men having mental breakdowns. "So just to confirm, you can walk, talk, and apparently sass like a champ, but you've been pretending to be a vegetable for how long again?" 3 years, she said, picking up her stuffed bear from the dresser and brushing dust off it. I needed time to figure out who was really behind it. I sat on the edge of the bed, tray still in hand like a forgotten prop. "Okay, pause. So your aunt, my lovely wife, and her equally charming mother have been gaslighting the entire family while you've been playing dead? That's, wow, that's next level dysfunction." She smiled, the kind of smile that said she'd been waiting to drop this bomb for a while. "You have no idea. They forged medical reports, paid off my doctor, and even got a fake therapist to sign off that I was mentally unfit to manage my own money." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process it all. Holy hell. And I thought my marriage was toxic because Sabrina microwaves fish. "They're worse than toxic," Lila said. "They're greedy. They want everything. My dad's company shares, the vacation home, and even my college fund. The only thing keeping me safe is the clause in the trust that says I can't be declared dead or incompetent unless 2 doctors verify it. And one of them already skipped town after Margot tried to bribe him again." "Jesus Christ," I muttered. "I married into the Sopranos." She sat beside me, crossing her legs like a pro. "I've been pretending to be helpless so I could gather proof. I've got recordings, screenshots, even copies of the fake legal documents they filed. I just need someone who isn't in their pocket to help me finish it." I blinked at her. "And that's me? You realize I'm the guy who spent 2 weeks arguing with your aunt about whether our cat should have its own Instagram?" "Exactly," she said. "You're harmless to them. They think you're an idiot. That's our advantage." I raised an eyebrow. "Well, thanks for the confidence boost." She laughed. "Don't take it personally. It's actually perfect. They'd never suspect you of being smart enough to stop them." "Oh, I'm smart," I said. "Just selectively lazy. There's a difference." She grinned. "Then use that laziness strategically. Help me set the trap." I stared at her for a long moment. This girl, this supposed invalid, was sharper than everyone in that house combined. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's say I help you. What's step 1? She leaned forward like a detective, revealing a plot twist. "We make them believe I'm still helpless. They'll keep talking, bragging, plotting. They can't help themselves. Meanwhile, we collect everything they say, every email, every transfer. When the time's right, we'll show them what real power looks like." I let out a low whistle. "You've really thought this through. 3 years in a bed gives you time," she said. "I binge-watched tutorials on hacking, legal codes, and negotiation tactics. I'm basically a bedridden James Bond with better hair." I had to admit I was impressed and slightly terrified. So, you sure you don't need like an adult? Someone with a badge and a pension? No, she said firmly. They'd spin it. They have lawyers on speed dial. The police would call me crazy. Fair, I said, nodding. Crazy is kind of the family aesthetic. Exactly. That's why you're perfect. You're invisible to them. Wow, thanks, I muttered. Nothing like being the human version of beige paint. She giggled, and I realized she was enjoying this a little too much. Look, she said, I know it's a lot, but I've got everything we need to expose them. We just can't do it alone. I looked at her, this kid who'd spent years pretending to be a prisoner just to outsmart her predators, and I couldn't help but feel a weird mix of pride and dread. All right, Lila, I said, you've got yourself a partner, but just so we're clear, if this ends with me in jail, I'm haunting your TikTok feed. She laughed again, genuine and bright. Deal. For the first time in months, I felt something close to excitement. Purpose, maybe even redemption, because here's the truth. I'd spent years being Sabrina's doormat, the background husband who carried shopping bags and nodded through dinner parties full of people who thought middle class was a disease. But helping Lila? That felt good, real, like finally being the guy my younger self wouldn't mock. She stood up, stretching her arms, and I realized how strong she actually looked. Lean muscle under those oversized sweaters. You've been doing squats while pretending to be paralyzed, haven't you? I asked. She shrugged. Had to keep the blood flowing. Plus, I didn't want to lose my edge. I laughed, shaking my head. You're officially scarier than your aunt. That's saying something. I'll take that as a compliment. She walked over to the dresser, pulled open a drawer, and handed me a flash drive. Everything's on there. Emails, recordings, account details. It's encrypted, but I'll teach you how to access it. You'll need to back it up, just in case they destroy the originals. I stared at the tiny device like it was a live grenade. Lila, if anyone finds this, I'm going to be the next guy in your family declared mentally unfit. Then don't let anyone find it, she said simply. Hide it somewhere they'd never look. Like Sabrina's cookbook collection, I muttered. No one's touched those since 2018. She grinned. Perfect. You're getting the hang of this. We spent the rest of the evening making plans. She outlined every move with the precision of a chess master, while I mostly nodded and tried not to look like a man in over his head. But by the time we wrapped up, I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. Furious at Margot for treating people like pawns. Furious at Sabrina for using love as leverage. Furious at myself for letting it all slide, because it was easier than confronting the truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear Lila quietly moving around her room, probably setting up cameras or transferring files. I stared at the ceiling and thought, well, Miles, you wanted excitement. Congratulations. You're now part of an heiress heist movie directed by Karma. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the joke in someone else's story. I was the plot twist. And I had a feeling that by the time Sabrina and Margot came back from their margarita-fueled vacation, they wouldn't recognize the man waiting for them. The assignment from hell had officially turned into the opportunity of a lifetime. If you've ever thought your life couldn't get any weirder, try having a teenage girl who's been pretending to be paralyzed for 3 years explain how your wife and mother-in-law orchestrated a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme before breakfast. That'll reset your definition of weird real quick. The next morning, I brewed my coffee like I was preparing for a court hearing. Lila was already in the kitchen, standing, fully functional, wearing one of Sabrina's hoodies and making scrambled eggs like she hadn't spent years drooling on silk pillowcases for dramatic effect. Morning, she said casually, like this was normal. You drink your coffee black, right? I blinked at her. Black, yeah. 'Cause apparently cream and sugar are for people whose marriages still work. She laughed, sliding a mug toward me. You really use humor as a coping mechanism, huh? Yeah, well, therapy costs money and sarcasm's free. I sat across from her, staring as she ate her eggs like a completely ordinary person instead of the walking plot twist she was. So, I said, let's talk about this performance of yours. You said you've been pretending for 3 years. How'd you even pull that off? Most people can't stick to a diet for a week. She leaned back, arms crossed. Discipline, Uncle Miles, and fear. That's a powerful combo. She took a sip of orange juice before continuing, her tone cool but sharp. It started after Dad died. He left everything to me, his company shares, his house, his savings. But there was a clause. Until I turned 21, The trust would be managed by my legal guardian, my mom, aka Margot's golden daughter. I frowned. Sabrina's sister, right? The one who's conveniently traveling for work all the time. Yep, except most of those trips were cover for meetings with shady accountants and lawyers. Margot runs her like a puppet. Sabrina, too. Yeah, I noticed that, I muttered. Your mom gives orders, Margot signs checks, and Sabrina provides emotional chaos. Real family synergy. Lila smirked. They didn't waste time. Within 6 months of Dad's funeral, Margot had the family doctor declare me mentally unstable, post-traumatic stress or something. They staged fainting spells, panic attacks, fake neurological symptoms. Then one night, I overheard Margot talking about how a helpless heir would make things easier. Her eyes hardened. So I decided to give them what they wanted. Helpless. I raised an eyebrow. Yukai decided to pretend? Yep. One day I stopped talking, stopped walking, played the part. You should have seen the look on Margot's face when I suddenly collapsed. She grinned, almost proud. It was Oscar-worthy. I sipped my coffee slowly. You know, I married into this family thinking they were dramatic. I didn't realize I'd joined a crime syndicate. They underestimated me, she said. I used that. Margot loves control, so she made sure I had everything I needed. A nurse, private tutors, security cameras everywhere. But I learned to hack into the camera feed, used it to monitor their conversations. I memorized every word, every lie. I stared at her, jaw halfway to the floor. You hacked the house? You? Hey, YouTube tutorials are free, she said with a shrug. And being locked in a bedroom for years gives you time to learn new skills. So, while everyone thought you were binge-watching cartoons, you were out here running Mission Impossible. She grinned. Exactly. I even hid a few recorders around the house. You know that lamp in the living room with the weird base? The one Margot called European minimalism? Yeah. It's got a micro camera inside. I bought it online using one of her old credit cards. She never noticed. I whistled. Kid, you're terrifying. I mean that in the best way. Thanks, she said, but I can't go to the police yet. Not until we have undeniable proof. You already have footage and documents. What more do you need? The Pope's signature? She shook her head. They'll twist it. Margot has influence everywhere. Lawyers, judges, even a friend in the district attorney's office. If I go public too early, they'll paint me as unstable again. I need to trap them on record bragging about the fraud. That's where you come in. I raised my hands defensively. Whoa, slow down, Veronica Mars. I'm flattered you think I'm useful, but I'm also very fond of not being sued. Relax, she said. You just have to act clueless. Be the same easygoing guy they always ignore. They'll say things in front of you because they don't think you're capable of understanding any of it. I chuckled dryly. So basically, keep being myself. Exactly, she said with a wink. Just with a bit more awareness this time. I rubbed my temples. I can't believe I'm teaming up with someone who learned espionage while pretending to be paralyzed. My life's turning into a telenovela. Hey, she said, at least you're not the villain. Yet, I muttered. Give it time. She rolled her eyes. Look, Uncle Miles, I know this sounds crazy, but you're the only one I can trust. Everyone else in this family is either corrupt or cowardly. You sure about that? Because I'm about one awkward phone call away from joining the cowardly column. You'll be fine, she said with infuriating confidence. I'll handle the tech side. You just play your role. And what's my role exactly? The world's dumbest double agent? More like the world's most underestimated one. Oh, great, I said. Can't wait to put that on my resume. She laughed again. Light, genuine, unbroken by the weight of everything she'd endured. And something inside me shifted. I'd spent years around people who faked kindness, faked virtue, faked love. But Lila, she faked weakness. And somehow that was more honest than anything her family had ever done. All right, I said, finishing my coffee. I'm in, let's ruin some lives. Her grin widened. That's the spirit. The next few days felt like living in a spy movie where the soundtrack was just my internal screaming. Lila showed me everything, her hidden files, her hacked phone backups, even the recordings labeled with dates and sarcastic notes like Margot being evil. Thursday edition. We sat on the couch, reviewing footage. One clip showed Sabrina and Margot sitting in the garden, sipping wine. Once that girl's gone, Margot was saying, we'll finally have peace and profit. You mean when she's declared gone, Sabrina corrected. We can't do anything rash until the paperwork clears. Yay, dear, Margot replied with that trademark smirk that probably made Satan take notes. Patience, the money will be ours soon enough. I glanced at Lila. Do they not realize you can hear everything? They think I'm too drugged to care, she said. Half the time, I was pretending to be asleep. This is insane, I whispered. You've been sitting on gold. Evidence, she corrected. Not gold, yet. We organized everything, videos, emails, transaction receipts, like a two-person task force with way too much coffee and not enough sanity. You know, I said one night, scrolling through screenshots, you could have just left, disappeared, started fresh somewhere. I thought about it, she admitted. But then I realized leaving means they win. They'd still have control of my father's legacy. I couldn't let that happen. There was a quiet steel in her voice that reminded me of her dad, a good man who'd always treated me like family back when that word still meant something. He'd be proud of you, I said softly. She smiled. I hope so, but I'm not done yet. So what's next? Phase 2, she said. We get them to brag. Brag? Margot loves to hear herself talk. So does Sabrina. If I fake being weaker, they'll think they've already won. They'll talk about their plans like villains in a cheap soap opera. You're not wrong, I said. Margot does monologues like she's auditioning for Broadway. Exactly. We'll record every word. She leaned closer. And when the time's right, we'll drop it all. Press, police, lawyers, boom. I had to admit, the kid had a plan. A reckless, brilliant, probably illegal plan, but still a plan. You know, I said, you might actually be scarier than Margot. She grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Good, I said, standing, because if we pull this off, we're going to need matching t-shirts that say Team Bedridden. She snorted. Deal. We spent the rest of the night setting up extra mics, testing angles, and mapping out every conversation that might happen when they got back from Mexico. I'd never been more nervous in my life, and I once accidentally called Margot Mom at a dinner party, but weirdly, under all the fear and caffeine, I felt alive, useful. I'd been the background character in Sabrina's self-absorbed sitcom for too long. Now, for once, I had a plotline. As I watched Lila quietly test her hidden camera lamp, I couldn't help but think, this girl had more courage than anyone I knew. She'd faked silence to find her voice. She'd played helpless to expose power. And now she was ready to fight back, with me, the accidental sidekick she'd drafted into her revolution. So, I said, breaking the silence, when this is over, what's the plan? Run off to Switzerland with your millions? She shook her head. No, I'm going to use it to build something better. A foundation for kids in situations like mine, trapped, unheard, underestimated. I smiled. Damn, you're good. No, she said softly, looking out the window. I'm just tired of bad people winning. I nodded. Then let's make sure they don't. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me, listening to the faint sound of Lila typing away on her laptop. My world had flipped upside down in 48 hours, and for once, I wasn't complaining. Because somehow, in this chaos, I'd found a reason to stand tall again. Maybe I wasn't just the handyman husband or the family punchline anymore. Maybe I was finally part of something that mattered. Little did I know the real storm hadn't even started yet. By Monday morning, my living room looked less like a home and more like a crime board from one of those police procedurals where the detectives all have caffeine addictions and trust issues. Sticky notes everywhere, string connecting photos, bank records, and a whiteboard with words like Cayman, wire transfers, and Margot Il Satan scrawled across it. Lila sat cross-legged on the couch, surrounded by laptops, her fingers flying across the keyboard like she was trying to hack into the Pentagon. So, what's the plan again? I asked for the third time, mostly because I wanted to hear her say it out loud. Record them admitting to financial manipulation, she said without looking up. Catch them bragging about it while they think I'm still the drooling invalid in the upstairs suite. Right, I said, pacing like a guy who had no business being part of this operation. You really think they'll just start confessing mid-conversation? Oh, Uncle Miles, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You've clearly never met Margot. She's physically incapable of keeping her mouth shut when she thinks she's won. She wasn't wrong. Margot had bragged about saving 10% on her Botox once, like she'd just negotiated world peace. Sabrina was no better. If there were an Olympic sport for oversharing, she'd be the reigning champion. Still, the idea of recording them and using it as evidence made my stomach twist. And you're sure this is legal? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mostly, she said, still typing. If it helps, I'll let you be the one who presses record. That way we can share the guilt. How generous, I muttered. I'm touched. You'll live, she said, smiling. Besides, you wanted to flip the script, right? Yeah, but I thought you meant emotionally, not, legally admissible evidence. She laughed, and I realized that despite the chaos, it had been a long time since laughter had filled this house. Usually it echoed with passive-aggressive compliments and the faint hum of Sabrina's phone notifications. Now it buzzed with scheming energy, the good kind, the kind that says karma's about to clock in for overtime. Okay, Lila said, snapping me out of my thoughts. Here's how this works. They're in Mexico for another week. They call daily to check in on me. During those calls, I'll act weaker, sadder, more hopeless. I'll tell them how grateful I am for them taking care of me and how I want to sign over my finances to make things easier. You're really leaning into the pity act, huh? I said, impressed. You'd be amazed how greedy people get when they smell surrender. I'm starting to, I muttered. She smirked. When they bite, they'll start talking about how close they are to cashing out. We record it, timestamp it, and back it up in 3 separate drives. 3? You can never be too careful, she said. Especially with people who sue their yoga instructors. She wasn't kidding. Margot had once taken a Pilates trainer to small claims court because the energy in the room wasn't calming enough. I sighed and dropped onto the couch beside her. You really think this'll hold up? It'll hold up long enough to burn them socially, she said. Once we go public, no one will touch them. Reputation is their currency. Take that away and they're broke. You've got a dark streak, I said. I like it. Runs in the family, she replied, grinning. We spent the rest of the morning setting up hidden mics. One in the living room lamp, one in the kitchen clock, one under the coffee table. Lila had even disguised one as a bottle of lavender-scented air freshener because, and I quote, rich people never suspect anything that smells expensive. By noon, my house was wired tighter than a spy bunker. We tested each mic by doing a mock interview where I pretended to be Margot and Lila pretended to be Sabrina. Mother, she said in a perfect imitation of her aunt's nasal voice, once we have the money, we'll finally be free to travel without that, what's the word you always use? I cleared my throat. Parasite? Yes, that's it, she said, dramatically clutching her chest. The girl who ruined everything by being born. I almost choked on my coffee. Jesus, that was uncanny. Years of practice, she said. They gossip loud enough for me to study accents. You're starting to scare me, I told her, though a part of me was genuinely impressed. By the evening, we had a full operation mapped out. She showed me her backups, cloud storage, encrypted folders, even a burner phone linked to an anonymous account. You've thought of everything, I said, leaning back. You sure you're not some undercover agent? If I were, she said, you'd be the guy they send to distract the villains while I do the real work. Harsh but fair. Around 8 p.m., Margot and Sabrina's video call came through. Lila quickly switched to her weak and innocent mode, slouching into the wheelchair, eyes glazed, voice soft. Hi, Aunt Sabrina. Hi, Grandma. Sabrina's face lit up on the screen, filtered within an inch of her life. Sweetheart. Oh, you look so much better than I expected. Margot leaned in, smiling like a snake in pearls. We were just talking about you, darling. How's my brave little angel? Still tired, Lila whispered, but I've been thinking about what you said, about letting you handle my finances. I swear I saw Margot's pupils turn into dollar signs. Oh, honey, that's so wise of you, she cooed. It's a big responsibility. You should focus on getting better. Lila nodded weakly. I just don't want to be a burden. I trust you. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The hypocrisy was so thick you could butter toast with it. Margot smiled like she was about to close a real estate deal. Don't you worry, dear. Once everything's signed, you'll never have to think about money again. Yeah, I muttered under my breath, because you'll have stolen all of it. Lila kept them talking for nearly half an hour. They bragged about how relieved they'd be when it was all over, how nice it'll be not to worry about those accounts anymore. By the end, we had enough self-incriminating nonsense to fill a season of American Greed. When the call ended, Lila replayed it, making sure the audio was clear. Got him, she said with a grin. You think this is enough? I asked. It's a start. Tomorrow we'll aim higher. Margot gets cockier the closer she feels to victory. We'll bait her into saying something even worse. What's worse than admitting she's stealing from her own granddaughter? Oh, you'd be surprised. Over the next few days, we made it a routine. Margot called daily, and every time, Lila fed her just enough hope to keep her talking. By Wednesday, Margot was practically glowing with greed. Once that brat's money is ours, she said one night, swirling her wine, I'm buying that villa in Cabo. You know, the one with the infinity pool. She actually said once that brat's money is ours? I asked in disbelief. Word for word, Lila said. She even sent Sabrina a link to the villa listing. I whistled. You think Karma accepts pre-orders? Because she's about to get express delivery. Lila smirked. Oh, I'm counting on it. Each evening, we'd watch the recordings like some twisted family reality show. There was one moment where Sabrina laughed about me. Miles is too dumb to notice anything, she'd said. I paused the video, looked at Lila, and deadpanned. They're not wrong about me being slow, though. She threw a pillow at me. You're lucky you're on my team, old man. Old man, I'm 38. That's practically ancient in internet years. She said, whatever, Zoomerbond, I replied. Just remember who's funding your pizza habit. You used your wife's credit card. Details, details. Despite the insanity, something about our partnership felt natural. Maybe it was because we were both outsiders in this family circus. Me, the broke husband they tolerated for tax reasons. Her, the inheritance target they underestimated. Together, we were building something like revenge, but also, weirdly, trust. Late Thursday night, we took a break. I ordered pizza while she organized the files. You know, she said between bites, you're not like them. Please don't compare me to your relatives while I'm eating. No, seriously, and she insisted. You're decent. You don't treat people like currency. I laughed. Decent doesn't get you invited to yacht parties. Good, she said. Those parties suck anyway. I leaned back, staring at the chaos of our living room. Post-its, laptops, cold pizza boxes, and two idiots plotting a digital revolution. You realize, I said, this is either going to end with us celebrating or with Margot having me buried behind a golf course. Then let's make it a good story either way. I smiled. Deal. By Friday, we had the perfect trap set, a fake surprise welcome party for when they got home. Lila would pretend to still be helpless, I'd play the loyal fool, and the whole thing would be recorded and streamed straight to the cloud. Time to make Karma go viral, she said, eyes glinting with that mix of rage and joy I recognized all too well, the look of someone who's finally done being a victim. I raised my soda can in a toast, to Operation Payback, to family therapy via felony exposure, she replied, clinking hers against mine. And as we sat there laughing in the glow of computer screens and moral chaos, I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the idiot husband anymore. I felt like the guy standing right where he was supposed to be, one bad decision away from justice. If you ever want to test how patient you really are, try living in the same house for 5 straight days with a teenager plotting to take down her millionaire grandmother while pretending to be bedridden again. It's like babysitting a CIA agent disguised as a high school dropout. The air in the house felt heavier each day, thick with that electric kind of anticipation that sits right between excitement and impending doom. Lila was unrecognizable from the sarcastic hacker who'd turned my living room into a war room. She'd slipped right back into her role as the fragile, trembling invalid, voice soft, eyes glazed, posture weak. It was honestly terrifying how good she was at faking vulnerability. You've missed your calling, I told her one afternoon as she practiced slurring her words. You could have been the next Meryl Streep minus the emotional stability. Please, she muttered, if I ever win an award, I'm thanking Margot for inspiring me through pure rage. She looked exhausted, though, not just physically, but emotionally. Playing dead, then pretending to be alive, and now faking death again, it would break anyone. But she was focused. You sure you're okay? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. You've barely eaten today. I'm fine, she said, adjusting the blanket on her lap. I just want this over with. I could tell she meant it. Revenge looks glamorous in theory, but living in its shadow for years drains you. Every victory still smells faintly of pain. That night, we sat at the kitchen counter with mugs of cocoa because, according to Lila, tea is for people who think denial is a coping strategy. The glow of her laptop lit her face as she pulled up the final plan, the fake welcome party. She showed me the digital invites, classy, understated, and oh so convincing. So, this is happening Sunday? I asked, double checking the calendar. Yep. They come back Saturday evening. We give them one night to feel safe, then pull the rug out. I nodded, pretending I wasn't internally screaming. And who's coming to this party again? A few trusted people, she said, our lawyer, Dad's old friend, remember him? Two bankers from the trust, and one rep from the foundation. Plus, cameras hidden everywhere. So, basically, brunch with a side of felony exposure? Exactly, she smirked. We'll toast with orange juice, you'll make your famous pancakes, and they'll incriminate themselves faster than they can say inheritance. You've really got this all figured out, I said. It's almost unsettling. I learned from the best, she replied dryly. Margot planned every scam with precision. I just upgraded the playbook. I studied her for a moment. This kid who'd gone from a silent doll in a wheelchair to a force of nature. You remind me of me, I said. She gave me a sideways glance. How? You're a washed-up accountant married to my evil aunt. Fair, I said. But I mean the old me. The me before I got comfortable being underestimated. Oh, she said, smiling softly. That guy. I shrugged. Yeah. He used to take risks, make plans. Now he just balances budgets and apologizes for things that aren't his fault. Well, she said, you're about to get your edge back. You make that sound like a superhero arc. It is, she said. Only instead of saving the city, we're saving my inheritance. I laughed, shaking my head. You've got a twisted sense of justice. You married into it. Touché. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clack of her keyboard. I hadn't realized how peaceful plotting revenge could be until that week. It felt purposeful, focused, like therapy with higher stakes. Finally, she spoke again. Can I ask you something personal? Sure, I said, sipping my cocoa. Why did you marry Aunt Sabrina? I froze mid-sip. Wow, you don't pull punches, do you? I'm serious, and she said. You're not like them. You say please and thank you. You hold doors open. You don't treat people like disposable napkins. Gee, thanks. I'll put that on my tombstone. Here lies Miles Garner, not a napkin, she smirked. You know what I mean. I stared into my mug, watching the chocolate swirl. Honestly, I married her because I thought love could fix things. I thought if I worked hard enough, she'd see me as her equal instead of a project. Did it ever work? Nope, I said. Turns out you can't therapy someone out of entitlement. I kept trying to build the bridge, but she just kept raising the toll. Lila snorted. Ouch. Yeah, but you know what? If I hadn't married her, I wouldn't be here helping you expose them. She tilted her head. So you're saying she was a necessary evil? Exactly. My life's cautionary tale with great hair. That got a laugh out of her. And for a moment, the weight in the room lifted. It was strange how much lighter things felt when you accepted your own stupidity. You know, she said, you're not bad at this revenge thing. Thanks, I said. I've had years of emotional boot camp. She looked at me curiously. Does it ever scare you, doing this? Knowing how far it could go? I thought about it. A little, but mostly it feels right, like I've been sleepwalking through my marriage and this whole mess is the slap I needed to wake up. So you're saying I'm your caffeine? Exactly. You're the espresso shot of justice, she grinned. I'll take that. Over the next 2 days, we fine-tuned everything. Lila wrote out scripts for the party, down to the timing of when she'd collapse in tears and reveal her secret. I printed fake documents for her to sign, giving Margot one last taste of false victory before the cameras caught her gloating. We even rehearsed the dialogue. I played Margot, which was disturbingly easy. Oh, Leela darling, I said in my best snobbish voice. Thank you for letting us manage your funds. We'll take such good care of it. By which I mean we'll buy handbags. Lila cracked up so hard she nearly dropped her laptop. You've missed your calling, she said between laughs. You could totally play a manipulative matriarch on TV. I'll pass, I said. I've lived the role long enough. The next night, after everything was ready, Lila sat on the porch with me. The air was cool, the sky dimming to purple, and for the first time in forever, I felt calm. So, I said, what happens after? She looked at me. After what? After they're exposed, after they're gone? What happens to you? She exhaled, long and quiet. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to school. Maybe I'll travel. I just know I won't waste another day pretending to be someone else. Good, I said. You deserve a real life. And you? She asked. What happens to you after? I chuckled. Probably divorce papers, a stiff drink, and a midlife crisis that ends with me opening a cafe. A cafe, she said, amused. Yeah, I'll name it something poetic, like Grounds for Divorce. She laughed, shaking her head. You're ridiculous. And you're too serious for your age, I shot back. Balance. Touché, she said, smiling softly. Then she went quiet for a moment before adding, You've been good to me, Uncle Miles. I know you didn't have to do this. I looked at her. Kid, I didn't know I needed to, but turns out helping you feels like the first real thing I've done in years. She didn't say anything after that, just leaned back, watching the stars, her expression unreadable, but peaceful. And I knew whatever happened on Sunday, whatever fallout followed, it would be worth it. Saturday came faster than I wanted. The house was spotless, cameras hidden, files backed up, every move rehearsed. I woke up early, made breakfast, and tried not to look like a man about to commit psychological warfare against his own wife. Around noon, I caught Lila standing at the mirror, adjusting her blanket and practicing her weak smile. You ready? I asked. Ready as I'll ever be, she said, taking a deep breath. You nervous? Nervous? She chuckled. I've been pretending to be paralyzed for years. This is the fun part. I grinned. Fair enough? She paused before sitting back down, her tone softening. You know, I used to think revenge would make me feel powerful, but now I just want peace. You'll get it, I promised. After tomorrow, you'll finally get it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about every choice that led me here, every compromise, every apology, every moment I'd let someone else dictate my worth. I used to believe in forgiveness, but forgiveness is luxury, and some people are too rich to deserve it. When I finally drifted off, it was with one thought looping in my head. By this time tomorrow, everything changes. Sunday morning felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Lila was calm, almost eerily so. I, on the other hand, had the jitters of a man about to face a firing squad armed with designer handbags. I looked around one last time. The cameras, the guests' seating, the folder with the fake transfer papers, and exhaled. You sure about this? I asked her. Absolutely, she said. They've taken enough. It's time to take something back. I nodded, pulling on my best poker face. Then let's give them the show they'll never forget. And as the clock ticked closer to their arrival, the air thick with silence, the calm before the storm felt almost sacred. Because for once, in this house built on lies, something real was about to happen. They came back like royalty on a private jet. Sabrina with that practiced, smug grin that said, I belong to a world where problems come with valet service. And Margot like a walking Vogue spread with a side of malice. I was standing on the front step, pretending to rearrange a potted succulent that had survived my neglect as their SUV rolled into the driveway. Sabrina waved like she was on a yacht tour, and Margot emerged holding a designer tote like she was carrying the deed to somebody's soul. They smelled like sunscreen and success, the kind of scent that makes you want to shower your gratitude away. Darling, Margot trilled the second she saw us. Oh yes, the sarcasm was all internally sourced. And Sabrina's smile put on its charity face. Pleasant, thin, and suspiciously photogenic. They scanned the porch like they were checking for stains on the welcome mat. Then, as if by cue, their eyes landed on Lila through the open front door. Lila sat in the living room in the wheelchair she'd been using for years, wrapped in a blanket, small and fragile-looking in a way that made Margot's maternal predators purr. She had the face of someone who'd been taught to look grateful, not free. For a split second, when Margot reached out and put a hand on Lila's shoulder, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be normal. I blinked. Of course it wasn't. How is my sweet Lila? Margot asked, the tone so saccharine it could rot teeth. Still drooling and useless? She whispered to Sabrina, loud enough for the chandelier to blush. Sabrina laughed in that way rich people laugh when they're trying to sound human. Lila managed a tiny practiced smile, and Sabrina swooped closer like she was inspecting a finalized investment. Margot sniffed the air theatrically. We had the most divine time, darling. Ocean views, exquisite service. It puts everything in perspective. How sweet, I muttered under my breath, earning a sharp look from Lila that meant Miles, not now. I'd been avoiding confrontation because subtlety had been my strategy for years. Quiet, invisible, the husband who carries grocery bags and bruised feelings. But watching them glide into our home, pockets full of sunscreen and entitlement, triggered something in me that had been fed up for a very long time. Later, when they finally stepped into the living room and the door clicked shut, Margot leaned down like she was about to whisper a bedtime prayer, and instead said, loud enough for me to hear, "As soon as we get the final signature, we'll transfer her funds to the Cayman account." The chandelier didn't flinch. Sabrina clucked in agreement like a trained bird. Lila, still wrapped in her portrait of helplessness, made a small, almost imperceptible movement of her fingers, one that said nothing to Margot, but everything to me. My heart rate did a thing. My mouth wanted to form words like knives. I kept my face neutral. I had to. Neutrality is underrated. It allows you to look like you belong while harvesting evidence from your enemies. I walked over to pour them a welcome home drink, orange juice, because fake champagne with a side of crime seemed gauche and acted like everything was normal. Sabrina stuck out a hand and gave me that dismissive half-hug rich people use on household staff. "Miles," she said, "we left a few things in the master for you to check. Don't ruin the linens." "Of course," I lied. "I'll be gentle." Inside my brain performed a slow, delicious little victory lap. The cameras were rolling, the mics were live, and every syllable they uttered was being lovingly time-stamped in triplicate. Margot padded toward the kitchen like a cat who already owned 9 lives and wasn't about to stop collecting more. She plucked a slice of lemon off the fruit bowl with the delicacy of someone who'd also once plucked a marriage for parts. "Did you miss us?" Sabrina asked Lila, the question framed like a test. Lila's eyes fluttered as if to say, "Yes, I miss the cost of living in your shadow." Instead, she croaked, "Some." Lila's voice was exactly as rehearsed, soft and vulnerable, a voice meant to lower the defenses of greedy relatives. Margot cooed in response. Then, because hubris is oxygen for people like her, she let the filter slip. "We did discuss the final paperwork while we were away," she said, hands rubbing together with glee. "It's just a matter of time before everything is transferred. That poor thing will be so relieved." I kept moving, sliding a plate of cookies onto the coffee table while listening to them speak like vultures choosing upholstery. Sabrina sighed like a woman who'd been given the right to sigh. "She's done so well," she said, looking at Lila as if she were a tax deduction. "Honestly, Aunt Margot and I were just saying how much easier things will be once it's all settled." Margot popped her condescending darling face and said, "Yes. Oh, I simply can't wait to secure that villa in Cabo." Imagine it, Sabrina. Turquoise water, private staff, absolutely zero responsibilities. She laughed, the kind of laugh produced when someone imagines a future where consequences don't exist. The camera caught it. The mic captured the flicker in her voice. Lila's fingers tightened on the blanket. The world around me narrowed to the sound of their plotting, and there was a smell in my chest like old paper money and guilt. At that moment, I felt more alive than I had in years of being polite. As Margot described the floor tiles she planned to install, marble, darling, imported, of course, Lila's eyes darted to me. She mouthed a word. Now. It was the cue we'd rehearsed. Calm, precise. The plan was in motion. I finished slicing the lemon with the steady hands of a man who suddenly had a cause. Every small motion was a cover for the big thing we were about to do. Guests arrived that afternoon. Our carefully selected allies, handpicked to look like ordinary citizens and to be legally useful. Mr. Newell, an old friend of Lila's father, who'd served as a family attorney before they'd been pushed out by Margot's charm offensive, arrived with a neutral face and a legal gravitas that could sink yachts. 2 trust officers showed up, the kind of people who speak in percentages and sigh into spreadsheets. And in my pocket, tucked against my ribs like a secret, was the drive with the audio backups and the transcriptions. Evidence that could turn a yacht into a dinghy. We played the part. I offered everyone drinks like the man who'd be eternally thankful for dishwasher duty. Lila remained the fragile centerpiece, a portrait of vulnerability. Margot and Sabrina's eyes glowed at the sight of our small, intimate celebration. They moved like predators, circling the table, already tasting the spoils. "We're so honored," Margot announced, over loud and perfumed, "to be welcomed home by such a devoted house." Her words hung in the air, heavy with entitlement. I felt everything tighten, my jaw, my stomach, like a coil ready to spring. We sat, we laughed politely, and the room hummed with the low electricity of premeditated exposure. At precisely the moment the cake arrived, homemade pancakes masquerading as a celebratory stack because Lila insisted on something low-key, the signal went out. Our hidden feeds, synced and uploaded to a secure cloud, began streaming to the devices of a few chosen watchers. Mr. Newell, the trust rep, and one undercover investigator Lila had carefully vetted. Margot lifted her glass, orange juice pretending to be champagne, and said, toasting the air with a confidence that smelled like victory, "To fortune and family," she declared. That was the cue. Lila's head tilted and she stood. The room stilled. Maybe they expected a fainting spell, a collapse, a soft crumple to the floor like she'd done countless times before. But instead, Lila stood up like a goddess who'd been pretending to be a relic, steady and fierce, and said, clear as a bell, "To my fortune and your fraud." The words landed like a grenade. Forks clattered. The chandelier blinked in sympathy. Sabrina's face went through a 5-act play in 10 seconds. Surprise, denial, hope, disbelief, and panic, all without skipping a beat. Margot's jaw dropped in a way that looked surgically impressive. For the first time, shame crept into that room, a new, unfamiliar guest. I turned on the living room television with a deliberate flourish, and the footage we'd recorded from Mexico began to play in full surround sound, Margot boasting, Sabrina cooing, plans discussed in casual tones that belonged on a stage, not in a family home. "Once that brat's money is ours," Margot was heard saying, wine breath and greed unmistakable. "We'll have the villa in Cabo in January," Sabrina added, laughing as if they were discussing brunch reservations. The words echoed around the room, and there was no graceful exit. The cameras, the mics, the transcriptions all sang one truth. They had discussed stealing a child's inheritance like a shopping list. The silence that followed was loud and honest. Margot's face lost that proud pink hue and went pale, the color a portrait of inevitability. Sabrina lunged for my phone, because of course she did. But Lila, who had rehearsed exactly how to be the hero in this moment, blocked her with a steady hand that looked nothing like the fragile girl they'd painted for 3 years. "Don't touch that," Lila said with a calm, sharper than any of Margot's manicures. I leaned back and let the room collapse on itself. The queens of my former life looked suddenly small and very, very human. Flawed, greedy, exploited. The house felt colder and cleaner. I sat there watching the slow crumble of entitlement, and for the first time felt the curious warmth of justice settle in my chest. The queens had returned, and they were about to be dethroned. There are moments in life when time stops, not in a poetic way, but in that horrifying, slow motion, oh crap, this is really happening kind of way. That was me, standing at the head of the table in our gleaming dining room, watching my wife and mother-in-law process the fact that the family's so-called mute angel had just stood up, spoken, and called them out as thieves in front of lawyers, bankers, and 2 people whose facial expressions could be described only as career-ending amazement. The chandelier above us flickered dramatically, probably out of sympathy, as Margot froze with her wine glass midair. Sabrina's jaw unhinged like a malfunctioning doll. For a split second, no one breathed. Lila, bless her teenage flair for the dramatic, didn't waste the pause. She took a step forward, strong, deliberate, spine straight, and repeated, "To my fortune and your fraud." Her voice didn't waver. It sliced through the silence like a courtroom gavel. If it were a movie, this was the scene where the audience would start clapping. But in real life, oh no. In real life, this was the scene where people start having small, quiet heart attacks. "What did you just say?" Margot stammered, clutching her pearl necklace like it had life insurance benefits. Sabrina blinked so fast I thought she was trying to Morse code her way out of trouble. "Lila, darling," she began, her tone the fake sweet kind that could peel paint off walls. I think you're confused. You've been through hell? Lila interrupted. Yeah, I know, thanks to you. Then she gestured toward the television mounted on the wall. My cue. I grabbed the remote, pressed play, and leaned back, arms folded as the footage began to roll. The Mexico videos filled the room. Margot's own voice, dripping with arrogance. Once that brat's money is ours, I'm buying a villa in Cabo. Sabrina's answering laugh, high, gleeful, cruel. She'll never even know what hit her. Miles is too dumb to notice. I turned my head just enough to catch Sabrina's reaction when she heard her own words. The irony hit her like a tax audit. Too dumb to notice, I said softly, raising an eyebrow. You sure about that, babe? Margot's mouth opened and closed like a malfunctioning goldfish. This is evidence? I offered helpfully. Yeah, it really is. Mr. Newell, the lawyer, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses with the sort of relish only a man who'd been waiting years for a comeback could muster. I have to say, Mrs. Bennett, he said, addressing Margot with legal precision, I was skeptical when Lila reached out. But this, he pointed at the TV as another clip played, Margot discussing doctoring medical records. This is damning, Sabrina's voice cracked. Miles, how could you do this to me? To you? I repeated, genuinely impressed by her audacity. Sweetheart, you lied to me, exploited a kid, and used me as the house idiot. The least I could do was help the actual victim. She blinked rapidly, mascara starting to betray her. I was protecting her. By faking her disability, I said, deadpan. That's a bold interpretation of protection, even for you. Lila stepped closer to them. You wanted me gone, she said. You said it. I heard you. Her voice shook now, but not from fear, from the pure, seismic release of 3 years' worth of pain. You both did everything to make me believe I was worthless. You took my voice, my body, my freedom, just to take my money. Sabrina flinched like she'd been slapped. That's not true. Save it, Lila snapped, and for a moment, she wasn't the frail niece or the lost heir. She was a storm in human form, and I swear the air itself got heavier. Margot set her glass down, carefully, delicately, 'cause heaven forbid she break anything expensive, and hissed, Do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying your own family. You destroyed it first, Lila replied. I'm just cleaning up. The TV kept playing. Their voices, their words, their own arrogance laid bare for everyone in the room to hear. Margot tried to reach for the remote, but I stepped between her and the table. I wouldn't, I said low and steady. You touch that, and I'll live stream this to the entire board of the Trust Foundation. She stopped dead, nostrils flaring, the predator realizing she wasn't the hunter anymore. Sabrina sank into her chair, silent for once, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling against her wineglass. Miles, she said finally, please, we can fix this. Oh, I agree, I said cheerfully. It's already being fixed, just not in your favor. The bankers in the room exchanged glances, one of them whispering something to the other. Lila nodded at Mr. Newell, who produced a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table toward Margot. What's this? Margot asked. A reality check, Newell replied. These are court documents prepared to reinstate Lila as the sole trustee of her father's estate, along with petitions to investigate all financial activity conducted under your supervision. Margot's face drained of color faster than cheap paint in a hurricane. You can't just... We can, Lila interrupted. And we will. The next few minutes felt surreal. Margot sputtered threats. I'll ruin you. I'll call my lawyer. You don't know who you're dealing with. But the thing about power is, once it's gone, yelling just sounds like static. Sabrina kept alternating between crying and glaring at me like I'd personally kicked her childhood puppy. I let her cry. I even handed her a napkin because I'm classy like that. You don't understand, she whimpered. We were desperate. Desperate for what? I said. A third vacation home? Another pair of diamond earrings? Please, the only thing you people are starving for is consequences. For a brief, exquisite moment, everything stopped again. You could hear the hum of the camera feed uploading to the cloud, the faint ticking of the dining room clock, and Margot's quiet, panicked breathing. Then, the cherry on top. The doorbell rang. I smiled. Ah, right on cue. I opened the door and in walked the trust's official representative, two uniformed officers, and a legal aide carrying a sealed evidence folder. Margot's gasp could have powered a wind turbine. "What is this?" she demanded. "Accountability," I said, grinning. "It's new to you, I know." Lila stood tall beside me as the officers approached. "Mrs. Bennett," one of them said to Margot, "we have some questions regarding allegations of fraud and coercion. You'll need to come with us." Sabrina's eyes widened. "You can't just— she's my mother. You should have thought of that before helping her forge half the paperwork," Lila said. "Oh, and don't worry, Aunt Sabrina. Your name's in there too. Equal opportunity justice." Margot tried to stand, but one of the officers gently placed a hand on her arm. "You'll have a chance to explain everything, ma'am," he said, "at the station." It was almost cinematic. Margot trying to maintain her dignity while her empire of lies crumbled around her. Sabrina broke into full-blown tears, muttering things like, "We can fix this, and it's all a misunderstanding." Lila just watched, face unreadable, eyes calm. When the officers led them out, the silence they left behind was different, cleansed, the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when you realize the air is finally breathable again. Mr. Newell let out a long breath. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I'd call that a successful dinner." I snorted. "Yeah, 5 stars on Yelp. Would expose again." Lila actually laughed, the sound bright and real and so freeing that even the lawyer cracked a smile. She turned to me and said softly, "You always said you wanted to flip the script." I nodded, heart thudding with something that felt suspiciously like pride. "Yeah," I said. "Didn't think it'd be this dramatic, though." "Oh, come on," she said. "You loved it." "Maybe a little." She raised an eyebrow. "A little? Okay, fine, a lot." We both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes after years of holding it in. As the last of the guests left and the house finally emptied, I looked around at the wreckage, the half-eaten dinner, the overturned wine glass, the shattered illusion, and felt something new settle inside me. Peace. Real, hard-earned, spine-deep peace. I glanced at Lila, who was staring at the door where her captors had just been led away. "You did it," I said quietly. "We did it," she corrected. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "We did." She leaned against the table, suddenly looking her age again, young, tired, but alive in every way that mattered. "You know what's funny?" she said. "For the first time in years, I don't feel invisible." "Good," I said. "Stay that way." She smiled, and I knew we'd both remember this night for the rest of our lives. The night a fake invalid and a frustrated husband brought down an empire built on greed. It wasn't glamorous or cinematic or Instagram-worthy, but damn, it was satisfying. And as I turned off the lights, I couldn't help thinking, sometimes the loudest revenge is just telling the truth and letting your enemies choke on it. You ever see what happens when a tornado hits a luxury boutique? That was the aftermath of our little family dinner. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop. Not 1 or 2 notifications, no. This was a full-blown buzz symphony. I groaned, rolled over, and saw 20 missed calls, a flood of messages from numbers I didn't recognize, and 3 voicemails from Sabrina that began with, "How could you?" and ended with the kind of muffled sobbing only narcissists can produce when their empire crumbles. It was glorious. The news had already hit the local press. Wealthy Manhattan family under investigation for $14 million fraud. The headline photo? A pixelated shot of Margot being escorted into a police car while wearing sunglasses big enough to hide her shame. I'd have framed it if that wasn't so petty. Actually, who am I kidding? I did frame it. Lila came down the stairs wearing pajamas, her hair a little messy, holding a mug of coffee like a war hero returning from battle. "You've seen it?" she asked, grinning. "Page 1, I said, sliding my phone across the table. "Margot looks like she just found out Botox isn't refundable." Lila read the article, sipping her coffee. "You think they'll make it to trial?" "Oh, they'll make it," I said, leaning back in my chair. The DA's office loves a scandal with a 0 or 2 attached. Besides, half the lawyers in Manhattan probably hate Margot personally. She chuckled. "I still can't believe it's over." "Almost over," I corrected. "They'll still try to weasel out. Rich people treat consequences like allergies. They pretend it's everyone else's problem." "Yeah," she said, staring into her cup. "But it feels different now, like I can breathe." I looked at her, this kid who'd faked paralysis for years. outsmarted an entire network of greedy adults, and somehow still smiled like someone who hadn't completely lost faith in humanity. You earned that breath, I said. She smiled faintly, but I could see it, the exhaustion behind her eyes. The fallout wasn't just public, it was personal. Lila's phone was blowing up too, calls from distant relatives suddenly pretending to care, friends offering moral support. Even old teachers sliding into her inbox with, "I always knew you were special" messages. They didn't care when I disappeared, she muttered. Now everyone wants a quote. Welcome to America, I said. We love a redemption arc. She laughed, but it was half-hearted. Do you ever feel weird about it? Weird about what? Winning. I thought about it. Yeah, I said slowly. I feel weird that justice feels so damn good, like it's supposed to be solemn, right? Moral high ground, lessons learned, forgiveness and all that. But honestly, I smirked. I slept better last night than I have in 6 years. Lila grinned. Me too. We watched the morning news together, a surreal domestic scene featuring 2 accidental vigilantes and a pile of legal paperwork. Margot and Sabrina's mugshots flashed on screen. Margot still managed to look smug even in custody, like she thought this was a Pete ear stunt gone slightly off script. Sabrina looked like she'd just discovered her contouring couldn't fix felony charges. So what happens now? Lila asked, biting into a piece of toast. Newell's handling the case, I said. He's good. He's already frozen the Cayman accounts, subpoenaed their doctor, and filed for restitution. Restitution? She repeated, tasting the word. Sounds nice. It means they're paying you back, I said. Emotionally, financially, karmically, the full package. She smiled. You sound like a commercial. What can I say? Justice sells. Later that afternoon, our lawyer stopped by. Newell had that unflappable calm of a man who's seen every kind of human disaster. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, flipping through folders like he was reading a script. Good news first, he said. The DA's office officially charged both Margot and Sabrina with conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and coercion. The evidence you gathered is airtight. What's the bad news? I asked. Margot's threatening a countersuit. Claims you manipulated Lila into fabricating everything. I laughed. Yes, the old "I'm the victim of my own crimes" defense classic. Newell smiled faintly. Don't worry, it won't hold. The recordings, financial trails, and corroborations from her former accountant seal it. But she'll try to drag this out. She hates losing more than she hates aging. That's saying something, Lila muttered. She's going to lose anyway, Newell continued. Once the trust is reinstated, you'll have full control again. I suggest you move the funds to an independent fiduciary. No more family oversight. Done, Lila said. I want nothing tied to them ever again. Smart, he said. Also, your father's company shares are legally yours now. That makes you the majority shareholder. Lila blinked. Wait, what? Congratulations, Newell said, smiling. You're officially the boss. She sat back, stunned. I never even thought about that. I grinned. Guess you just inherited a second job. She groaned. Ugh, don't remind me. I just learned to walk again, metaphorically. You'll handle it, I said. You're built different. When Newell left, the house went quiet. Lila sat in the living room, staring at the blank TV. You okay? I asked. She nodded slowly. It's just weird. My whole life, they treated me like I was powerless. Now I have all this control, and I don't even know what to do with it. Take your time, I said. Power's like tequila, best handled slowly, or you'll wake up regretting everything. She smirked. Good advice, Uncle Miles. Best you'll get for free. The next few days felt like a calm aftershock. The press kept chewing on the scandal like a favorite bone. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Social media threads lit up with hashtags like fraud family and the mute. Heiress speaks. Memes popped up. My favorite was one of Margot with the caption, when you fake compassion but get real consequences. Sabrina apparently had been released on bail and was staying with a friend, which probably meant some poor soul she was manipulating into sympathy. Margot's bail was denied. According to reports, she'd called the judge a jealous bureaucrat. Bold move. One evening, while Lila and I were watching a rerun of Shark Tank, her new favorite show, she turned to me and said, You think I'll ever be normal again? I looked at her. Define normal. You know, Not suspicious of everyone, not waiting for someone to pull the rug out. Probably not, I said honestly. But that's okay. You've earned your paranoia. She laughed. That's comforting. I try. She leaned her head back against the couch. I keep thinking about the last 3 years. Every fake smile, every lie they told me, and I wonder, did they ever love me? Even a little? I sighed. Maybe, in their own twisted, self-centered way. But love without empathy is just control with better branding. You sound like a therapist, she said. Please, I charge too little for that. We both laughed, and in that moment, I realized something. We weren't just allies anymore. We were family, the real kind. Not by law or money, but by shared scars. A week later, we met with the trust board to finalize the transition. Lila wore a sleek navy dress and the calm expression of someone who had survived hell and come back with receipts. I stood behind her, mostly moral support, partially bodyguard, fully proud. When the paperwork was done, she shook hands with the board members and said, "Well, thank you for believing me." One of them replied, "It wasn't hard. The truth has a way of speaking for itself." On the way home, she was quiet for a while before finally saying, "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "They can't take anything from me anymore. Not my name, my choices, my future. They're gone and I'm still here." "That's not the best part," I said. "The best part is you made it happen." She smiled, eyes glinting. "You helped." "Minor role," I said. "I was more comic relief than hero." "Maybe," she said, smirking. "But every story needs a good sidekick." I pretended to be offended. "Sidekick? I carried this plot on my back." "Sure, Batman. I'm more of a Deadpool." "You wish." We both laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks, the kind that come from release, not sorrow. That night, after dropping her off at the guest house she'd decided to keep, I stood in my own kitchen, sipping a beer, watching the city lights blink through the window. My phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Sabrina. I debated deleting it, but curiosity won. Her voice was shaky, slurred from either wine or panic. "Miles, please, you don't understand. I didn't know what Mom was doing. I just followed. I made mistakes, but I still love you. Please call me." I stared at the phone, then laughed. "Yeah," I said aloud, and you followed right into handcuffs. I deleted the message, finished my beer, and let the silence settle. For the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Upstairs, I could hear Lila humming softly in her room. Something light, something free. Justice wasn't a fantasy anymore, and it was a song playing quietly in the background of our new lives. And in that moment, I realized something profound and stupidly simple. Peace doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes it arrives kicking down the door, dragging karma by the collar, and wearing your enemy's arrogance as a crown. And man, it looked good on us. If someone had told me a year ago that my wife and her mother would be trending on Twitter for financial fraud while I sat in my kitchen eating cheesecake with a teenage millionaire, I would have told them to check their meds. But life, as it turns out, has a dark sense of humor, and apparently, so do I. The scandal had gone national by the time the coffee finished brewing. Every talk show, podcast, and internet gossip page had some variation of our story. The bedridden heiress that outsmarted her greedy family was the headline on one. Another called it Inheritance Gate. There were hashtags, #wheelchair revenge, #grandma got caught, and my personal favorite, Miles was right. Okay, fine, I might have started that one myself, but it had traction. By the time I scrolled through my feed, even strangers were writing think pieces about the dangers of generational greed. It was poetic justice wrapped in internet chaos. Lila came into the kitchen wearing sweatpants, sunglasses, and the kind of energy that only people who've publicly destroyed their enemies radiate. She flopped into a chair and grabbed the newspaper I'd laid out for her. "They quoted me again," she said, mouth half full of toast. "I just wanted the truth to come out." God, I sound so diplomatic. You'd never guess I wanted to light their house on fire 3 weeks ago. "Yeah, the press team's working wonders," I said, pouring her orange juice. "You're officially America's favorite miracle kid. I saw a tweet that said you're the Gen Z symbol of resilience." She smirked. "I should sell t-shirts." "You could call it the Fraud Family Collection," I said. Slogan, "We rise, they bail." Lila laughed so hard she nearly choked on her toast. That's awful and genius. You'd make a killing in merch. Maybe that's my calling, I said, by a morally justified capitalism. Outside, the late spring sun was spilling through the windows, turning our little corner of chaos into something almost peaceful. The police cars were gone, the reporters had stopped camping outside, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt, well, ours. The phone buzzed again, and I groaned. Another unknown number. If this is another journalist asking for a comment, I swear I'm charging consulting fees. Block them, Lila said lazily. Or tell them you're writing a memoir. They'll leave you alone if they think they're the villain. That's terrifyingly good advice, I said. Remind me to never get on your bad side. Too late, she said, smirking over her sunglasses. You've seen me without coffee. Fair. The doorbell rang. For a split second, my old anxiety kicked in. Back when doorbells meant bad news, another demand, another debt, another disappointment. But this time, it was Newell, our ever-composed lawyer, carrying a small box and wearing an expression that could only be described as smug satisfaction. Morning, he said, stepping in. You're going to want to sit down for this. Lila and I exchanged a glance. That better not be another lawsuit, I said. No, Newell said. It's a check. He set the box on the table, opened it, and handed Lila an envelope. From the restitution fund. Court expedited the process after Margot's confession. Lila blinked. Wait, she confessed? Oh, completely. He said. Apparently the pressure got to her. She threw Sabrina under the bus in record time, blamed the stress of motherhood for her actions, and tried to claim she was manipulated by external influences. The judge didn't buy it. I grinned. Karma's on schedule. More like ahead of schedule, Newell said, sliding a document toward me. They've also awarded you, Mr. Garner, a small compensation for your cooperation. Officially, it's hazard pay. Unofficially, it's the court's way of saying, good job surviving that circus. I opened the document. My eyes nearly popped. You're kidding. Nope, he said. That's 7 figures, Mr. Garner. You've earned it. I stared at Lila. We're rich, kid. She grinned. Correction. You're slightly less broke. I'm rich. We both laughed so hard that Newell had to excuse himself before we got cheesecake crumbs on his paperwork. When he left, I turned to Lila. So what's your plan? Blow it all on yachts and therapy? She tilted her head. Honestly, I'm thinking scholarship fund. I froze mid-bite. You're serious? Yeah, she said. Kids like me, people who get manipulated, exploited, trapped, they need a way out. Money doesn't fix everything, but it sure as hell helps. I smiled. You really are your father's kid, she smiled back. Yeah, guess I am. We spent the rest of the day planning ridiculous things we'd never actually do. She wanted to buy a llama farm in Vermont. I said we should open a private investigation firm called Lies and Pies. You handle the lies, she said. I'll handle the pies. It felt good, light, absurd, free. By evening, we decided to celebrate properly. Lila ordered cheesecake from her favorite bakery, the kind with the caramel drizzle and pretzel crust, and we opened a bottle of champagne that had been collecting dust since my wedding. Poetic, huh? I said, popping the cork. The same bottle I was saving for our anniversary, now celebrating my freedom. Cheers to irony, Lila said, raising her glass. To karma, I replied. To survival, she added. To cheesecake, I said, because honestly, it was that good. We clinked glasses and dug in. Between bites, she said, You ever think about what you'll do now? Like, really do? Yeah, I said, I've been thinking about it. I'm done being anyone's side character. Maybe I'll buy that cafe I joked about. Something small, quiet. No board meetings, no egos, no in-laws. She grinned. What'll you call it? The Bedridden Bean, I said instantly. A tribute. Lila nearly snorted champagne out her nose. That's dark. I love it. It's perfect, I said. Coffee for survivors of nonsense. Your tagline writes itself, and she said, healing through caffeine and sarcasm. Exactly. Shit. And you can design the logo, something ironic like a coffee cup wearing a neck brace. She was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. You're insane. I'm retired, I corrected. Big difference. The laughter faded into comfortable silence. Outside, the city buzzed softly, distant and harmless. Lila leaned back, gaze thoughtful. You know, for the first time, I don't feel scared. Not even a little. That's how you know you've won, I said. You think so? Yeah, I said. When you can sit in the wreckage of your old life, eat cheesecake, and laugh, that's peace. She nodded slowly. Then I guess I'm finally at peace. The next morning, our faces were on TV again. Only this time, the headline was Justice Served, Heiress and Uncle Law Partner, in Landmark Case. There was a picture of us walking out of the courthouse, both smiling like people who'd just gotten their lives back. The media painted it as an inspirational story: bravery, resilience, truth. I didn't mind the spotlight this time. For once, it wasn't covering a lie. A few days later, we met Newell again to sign the final documents. Margot had accepted a plea deal, 10 years with probation review after 6. Sabrina, ever the opportunist, agreed to testify against her own mother in exchange for reduced sentencing. I guess betrayal really does run in the family. When I read her statement, I didn't feel anger anymore, just pity. She'll never change, I said. No, Lila agreed, but that's not our problem anymore. We walked out of the courthouse and into the sun. Reporters called out questions. Lila, how does it feel to finally be free? Miles, do you regret exposing your wife? But we just smiled and kept walking. Some moments don't need explanations. Later that evening, we threw a private, non-party, no photographers, no speeches, no grand toasts, just me and Leela. 2 slices of leftover cheesecake and a cheap bottle of sparkling cider. You know, she said between bites, we should do this every year. What, celebrate justice? I asked. No, she said, smiling. Celebrate peace. I nodded. Deal. As the night stretched on, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened, every fight, every lie, every sleepless night, wondering if I'd wasted my life trying to be accepted by people who saw me as disposable. And then I looked at Lila, sitting across from me, alive and laughing, and I realized something profound. Every mistake, every humiliation, every broken moment had led to this one. This quiet, imperfect, beautiful redemption. Hey, she said suddenly, breaking the silence. What are you thinking about? I was just wondering, I said, if karma takes requests. She smirked. Why? Because I'd like to send Margot a Christmas card that says, Hope prison food is gluten-free. Lila laughed so hard she nearly dropped her fork. You're terrible. I'm evolving, I said. There's a difference. We spent the rest of the night swapping ideas for ridiculous revenge merch. Fraud family candles that smell like guilt, trust fund tears bottled water, and Margot mugshots coffee cups. It was childish, ridiculous, cathartic, and exactly what we needed. When she finally went to bed, I sat alone for a while, staring at the quiet kitchen, the remnants of dessert, the faint glow from the streetlights outside. My life had been burned down to ashes, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because ashes mean something's been purified. And if there's one thing I'd learned from this madness, it's that sometimes losing everything fake is how you finally earn something real. I cleaned up the dishes, turned off the lights, and whispered into the still air to cash, karma, and cheesecake. And somewhere in the silence, I could almost hear the universe laughing back in agreement. It's been 6 months since the dinner that detonated my old life, and somehow I'm still surprised by how peaceful quiet can be. No phone calls demanding favors, no cold stares from a wife pretending affection, no background noise of family politics. Just the hum of my coffee machine, the chatter of customers, and the soft clinking of mugs in my cafe. The bedridden bean. Yeah, I went with it. The sign makes people laugh. And when they ask why it's called that, I just smile and say, long story. Involves a fake invalid, a Mexican villa, and $14 million worth of karma. It gets a laugh every time. Lila's overseas now, studying media law because, of course, she'd pick a career that lets her roast people like Margot for a living. We talk every week. She's thriving, using her story to fight for kids who got chewed up by greedy guardians. Every time I see her on Zoom, confident, alive, free, I realize the kid who once pretended to be powerless turned out to be the strongest person I know. As for Sabrina, she signed the divorce papers from county jail. I didn't even read her apology letter, but I did keep the check from the property settlement. Call it poetic severance pay. Margot's still fighting appeals, probably charming her cellmates with investment tips. Me? I've never felt richer, and I'm not talking money. Some mornings when I'm closing up shop, I catch myself smiling at nothing. Maybe it's the coffee, maybe it's the calm, or maybe it's the sweet realization that freedom doesn't taste like victory champagne. It tastes like espresso at sunrise, earned one quiet cup at a time. The world finally stops spinning around other people's expectations. Every now and then, someone recognizes me from the news and asks if I miss the old life, the mansion, the luxury, the spotlight. I just grin and say, no, I traded it for something better. And when they ask what that is, I nod toward the counter, where the bell rings softly, and say, peace and cheesecake on the house for those who believe in karma. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that freedom really does have a funny taste, and I'm never giving it back.